Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're working on another of Sammy's reels. This one is an Okuma Cold Water, and we did one a couple of days ago from him. It was a low profile Okuma. This is the round bait caster, and it's a rather large round bait caster. And we're going to show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to keep it fishing for the coming season. So we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces. That involves the nut cap and the handles and the like. And we'll start with a small screwdriver to remove the set screw for that handle cap. As we do, I want to encourage you, if you like these types of videos, if you like the art of or hobby of reel repair, if you are looking for something to do and information about how to get started in it, well, that's kind of what these videos are about. The idea with this video is to teach you to do it yourself. And if you have one of these reels, how to service your own reel. And if you're servicing reels for others, well, sometimes this will show you the process or the tips or the techniques behind it that will enable you to do that efficiently and keep their reels fishing as well. All right, you may have noticed that everything sprung up when we did this. You have a handle and you have a little washer behind the handle, which is always a good time to tell you to take pictures along your way. Make sure that you know the sequence of the pieces that you remove, how they came apart, how they go back together, and take pictures if you're uncomfortable with your memory. I am. I take pictures. That's the video here. Now, you don't have to take videos, right? You can do other approaches. A fixed camera at critical points doesn't hurt. And whatever you're comfortable with, make a record of what you're doing so that you know when it's time to reassemble, you have a reference point. There's little pock marks in here, and there's a little stud on this star adjuster, and that's going to make the click noise when you back off. So just put that in the corner. Notice that we have a combed spring here. One side is wide and one side is narrow. The narrow side goes down when it's time for reassembly. And then this should just walk off. And we can do this two ways. We can put the star adjuster back on, or we can just take the wrench. And take these off by hand and note the sequence of the washers underneath it. The washers underneath it are curved or flat, and you need to see where and how they go. And if you've lost track of that, go to the schematic. So we have the nut adjuster, and then we have a flat washer. Then we have a couple of tension washers, maybe 3 or 4 in here. And there's no real right or wrong way to put that. There's 3 of these. Most of the time they go opposites. So a belly one way to a belly the other way. And that's all we need to do on this side right now in terms of removing that. Next, we want to remove the side plate. And that's going to involve removing the line counter as well, because that usually gets trapped behind the gears. Very important when you're looking for how to remove the side plate or the line counter, check behind the reel. Don't just assume that you have a reel that only has face screws. Now this one, I'm not sure if that's just holding the shield here. It kind of looks like it might be. So I'm going to leave that one for a moment, but I certainly don't want to leave this one, which is at the back of the line counter. That has to come out. The reason we're doing that is that if this reel mimics the smaller low profile one, the stem from the line counter that intersects with the drive gear is going to be behind the main gear. If it's behind the main gear, you're going to either damage it or pull out the main gear or do some other things that, well, in the end may require another fix that you weren't planning on. All right, we have 2 screws on the front end of this, and right now I'm just kind of loosening it. It's not going to go anywhere until we remove the side plate, but I do want to do that. And while I do that, I'm also noticing that 2 of the screws, or at least one of the screws, is different from the one we took off in the back. These 2 are longer. The one in the back is the shorter one, and that's of course is important when you go to reinstall. So the 2 long ones going to face the smaller one in the back. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 Phillips head screws. We'll take those off next. I'm going to do the same thing here, and if I remember this reel, one of these is probably going to be a different screw, but I work on so many reels it may be a different one. Well, I guess my memory's pretty good. The one up top is a longer screw than the one in the back post. And it may be this way too. We're going to find out. This is why you want to take pictures along the way. There's two are the same. And we'll see if this one's short or long. Okay, so for whatever reason, probably is the case, 3 of these screws, I don't know if they're in the picture or not, 3 of these screws are long. The short one belongs under the line counter there, and that's important when you go to reinstall. You want to remember where the short one goes. Let's see if the case comes off now. And we got more than the case, that's okay. Here's that line counter I was talking about, it's right here. We have our spool comes off next. And then we have access to the back by the 2 screws there. And looking at this, I think I probably have to take the small one off. So this is a little bit different in the drive sequence than the other one was, but that's okay. I've worked on these Okumas enough that I understand what's going on here. All right, we have a line gear and we have a line drive. First off, I'm testing the line gear to make sure that it works nice. Now I'm going to remove the cap here, and I move that over to the side to do that because I want to check the line guide pawl. I'm going to do a little cleaning on the cap. Now you can do this first, last, or somewhere in between, doesn't matter, but you do, and you should work on the line guide pawl as part of your service. Let's see if we can just tap that out. Check your pawl, make sure that the angles of those teeth, probably shows up better this way, the angles of your teeth, both points, are nice and crisp. Make sure that there's no dirt or debris on the shoulders. You can check inside the cavity. The worm gear is nice and clean. Go ahead and put a drop of oil into the carrier and some oil onto the line guide. I do not use fishing reel grease on the worm gear. Depending on where you're fishing, that fishing reel grease tends to hold dirt and debris, and eventually it'll clog the line guide operation. I had mentioned before, check your shoulders on this pawl. Most of the time when I find a lot of dirt accumulated on the shoulder, it's because the service tech or whoever used the grease there and not the oil. Oil will evaporate, so you do need to lubricate it more frequently. However, like Sammy's doing here, if it's about a year since service, you'll be fine. All right, clean that up. There's a little bit of some debris. I'm just going to use a light steel wool. It's 4-0 steel wool, just to kind of polish up the slide, and we should be good to go there. While I have the oil out, the only other thing I need to do here is oil that back bearing, and we can take the case. I'm going to check under here. There may be a bearing under here. If there is, I certainly want to oil that. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't. If I was smart about this, I probably would have done the schematic. I get asked all the time about schematics. Where do you find them? A simple internet search and put in this case, the Okuma Cold Water 303. And you should get a result if you put in schematic after that. And if you're not getting any hits, try 303 fishing reel. But there's one site out there that's very good, has a lot of different ones, and that's called reelschematic.com. And there certainly are others out there. There's a lot of fishing reel services in the lake that have that. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing a bearing there, so we're just going to oil anyway. We'll oil that shaft and collar as it comes through. I'm going to go right back in, put this back. Just align it with the holes that you have. It's always safe to check when in doubt. And it probably would make sense. Sometimes you get the extra bearings in here, sometimes you don't. We have the bearing in the case, so as long as you have one bearing on each side of the spool, that's going to ensure smooth operation. In this case, the bearing is sitting inside the spool. Sometimes it sits inside the carrier here, and you just have a bushing or something on the back end of the case. There, just tighten that down. Now this line has got an awful lot of salt on it, and I recommend that you change the line on your reel every year. I don't know if this, either Sammy is fishing in very salty environs, or the line hasn't been changed in a while. Another indication of that is the way that it kind of bunches. Its lines, monofilament's got memory to it, and over time it is going to just curl like that. So if you're seeing your line curling, it's probably time to change out the line, particularly monofilament. Monofilament is pretty inexpensive, and the downside to not changing it is you're probably going to lose a fish of a lifetime, or at least have a story to tell because you didn't change your line out and it kept snapping off. Maybe you lost that $20 lure or something. So just take your time, go ahead and do that. All right, let's go over to the business side. I just oiled the bearing on this one. We'll go over to the business side. I'm going to remove this screw. Again, I didn't think it was necessary to remove it from the side plate, but it is necessary. I'm noticing there is no seam here, so it is necessary to remove it in order to get to the gear works. This has pretty much got the same drive to it as the Okuma Classic, or the Magda. Magda? I'm not quite sure which one it is. And we want to take this one out, which is holding the main gear. Now I just noticed that the main gear started to spin when I went to do the unscrewing that. So we're just going to use the handle as a wrench to kind of hold that in place. And I don't know, can we... This is where you want to remove your line counter, and I think everything else is going to... Well, let's just take the main gear out. It's easier to do it this way. You can see pieces and parts are coming, and again, if you don't know the reel, getting the schematic will certainly help you with that. So even though we did a cold water low profile bait caster, this is not that reel, and there is something else going on with this, that being that you have the guts of a like an Okuma Classic as opposed to the low profile one that you saw earlier. This is a traditional forked anti-reverse dog, which just came off of the post here. And I guess what we have here is we have a little bit of a stud. That stud should come in and out of both cases, I think. Yeah. I prefer to have that one mounted inside the dog in the other side of the case. So we'll take that off, we'll put it over here. We'll show you how to reattach that in a moment. Inside here you are essentially looking at the Okuma Classic. You have the jack, which extends down, your yoke. Notice that the slot on the pinion gear faces in, and you have your main gear assembly below that. So let's start by taking off. You put that into my parts tray so we don't lose that. Take off the jack first. That's a single screw up top. Now a lot of folks use different patterns of organizing their pieces and parts. That's up to you in terms of what you like to do from an organization standpoint. I would just say have a plan when you go in that you know how you're going to do that. Don't wait until all of a sudden you got a pile of parts like I do in a tray to remember that it goes one way or the other. There's a little washer behind that screw, so I'm just going to put that right in there. Our pinion gear came out. Our yoke came out. There are, I can take the handle off. There are two springs for the yoke, I like to put those into my tray as well because, well, they get have a tendency to shoot. And then we can bring that main gear and click assembly out here. As you notice, there's a whole host of washers that came out. That's why you want to do that. You have a collar and an anti-reverse gear. We have some greases in there, so we want to clean that up as well. All right, you don't need to oil that collar and anti-reverse gear. As a matter of fact, it's recommended that you do not oil that because that is a friction-driven device. We're just going to get some grease into the back bushing. And we can reset some of this. Let's go back to this main gear. We'll check the drag washers. This is your anti-reverse click ratchet. Underneath this, separating the click ratchet, is a Teflon washer. They don't need any oil or grease or anything. And it looks like we have Carbon-Tex washers in here, and they wouldn't need any kind of greases as well. What you do want to do is you want to make sure that your main gear housing is free of dirt and debris so that you get maximum drag performance. Check the teeth on the main gear, make sure that they're uniform and crisp, that they're not chipped or cracked or broken in any regard, and then go ahead and put some grease onto that. You don't have to get the grease in every tooth. The pinion gear will spread it around, and if you overload the grease, you're just going to have a puddle of grease on the side like we just mopped up there. Main gear goes on next. Just like that. And then we have our washers. These are Carbon-Tex washers, so the Carbon-Tex washers do not get any assist here. Just make sure that they're clean. If you found out that the cross hatching had any dirt and debris in it, just use a hard brush and scrub it off, but these are clean. First one is the big one because there's a circle down below there that it's got to clear. We have a traditional 6 washer set. We have 3 metals, 3 fabrics. The middle metal is what's called an eared washer. In this case, it's got 4 studs on it. That's the one that's going to hold the main gear. The other 2 are going to hold the axle shaft or the gear sleeve. So we'll start with one of the metal washers, and we go to the smaller ones for the second and the third. Here's the one that goes in the slots. Notice that the points are bent down. The down side goes into the slot. Next up is the last of the Carbon-Tex. And that. And then we got a little shim washer that's going to go on for where that bearing cap is there. It's a tight fit, but it's needed to be there. There we go. Just took a little bit. Okay, on the back end of this then, we have 2 things going on. We have that instant anti-reverse, or wait, not the classic anti-reverse. Find the beak, and the beak is going to go in so that it intersects with the tooth on the ratchet like that. And we have this little wheel here, interestingly enough, spring driven. That spring belongs in this little cavity here. And then our slots belong there. You can see it needs to sit flush, so the one tag on the slot goes behind the spring that we just put in that cavity. Next up we have that little washer. And I noticed we knocked off that that anti-reverse dog. I keep wanting to say instant, it's not. So this is the way that the assembly is going to run. And what we need to do as we put this in, you kind of need to aim it for the hole. Before we do that, I want to make sure that I get the pinion gear in, because the pinion gear sometimes is difficult to mount after the main gear. Same thing you want to do here. You want to check the teeth on it to make sure that that's all uniformly clean. You want to grease the gear. Grease the slot for the gear. You can also put a little bit of grease onto the shoulder, which is where that slot is going to ride. And I use Penn Precision Wheel Grease for this. I also use an artist's brush, as you've seen. And to me, that just works well. Okay, let's take the main gear then. I'm going to invert that, hold everything tight. And now we're going to go for the post here. Okay, I did pretty good, other than I just knocked out that little bushing in the front end there. So this is what it looks like so far. We've remounted your pinion gear, meshed the pinion gear with the main gear, held everything tight, and we have our anti-reverse dog set, and you can just check that right there. Next up then, we want to grab the jack. We've held that screw in the place here because, well, it's got that little washer on it. And we want to make sure that we can get that started. And a lot of these don't have that little washer. I'm kind of finding it curious, but maybe that's an improvement that they've made to this particular model. Maybe they're noticing that it hangs up a little bit. This is the way that that goes on. And as sometimes happens, you don't get it started quite right. Just take a breath. Don't panic. Set up and do it again. Okay, just finishing up tightening that now. So that's your internal set now for the reel. What we need now is that backing. Just line that up. Make sure it snaps into place and that all three of your screw holes are right. There's a little washer now that goes on the carrier right there. And we have the big screw. That's the one I like to do first because that's the main gear. The other ones are going to hold everything else in place, but I like to get that main gear tight first. Tighten that one up. And we have the two flat screws go next, one on each side. And again, if you can do this one, you can do the Magda. I think it's Magda. That's a smaller profile Okuma reel, but so they share very much the same look and feel. Okay, I think what I want to do right now is I want to reset that line counter. I think that could probably come off. This can go on. I'm looking, the drive side for the line counter is on the back here. This is the line guide drive. So let's go ahead and bring this up and in. Next. Yep, that's good. Go to your basket, get the two long screws. I said basket because that's what I'm using. Of course, if you're using something else, go to your parts repository and get your screws, however or wherever you put them. That's one. And again, if you didn't take this off, you're risking bending it, and if you bend it, it won't have the contact with the drive gear on your pawl assembly. All right, that's 2. When I did the cold water, I made the error of installing the small one until later, so we'll take care of that one right now so that we don't have a lapse of memory again. And again, if you're interested in these types of videos, if I held you this long and you're finding it interesting, go ahead and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, use that notification button. I work on all kinds of reels. I just did an Yvette lever drive reel. I've done plenty of spinning reels. I do old, I do new, and everything in between. And this will show you how to do it yourself so that you can keep your reels running just nice and fine. All right, this just reseating now the washer assembly and the bearing or bushing. I guess if you really wanted to hot rod this reel, you probably could do a little bit more in terms of the replacing this bushing with the bearing. All right, let's give this a turn before we go any further. Oh, it's turning nice and smoothly. You can see all the internal pieces. Okay, time to reinstall then. We can put a drop of oil here. It's been a long time. I don't remember if I've oiled it. It won't hurt it. I like to put a little bit of grease on the shaft itself, which is going to go inside the pinion gear. Now we should be able to seat the assembly. And what we can do now is take those 3 long screws, because we know they go on this side, so they go at noon, 6, and 9. And we know that that short one goes at 3. That's a reference to an analog clock for those of us that still use them. All right. The third long one goes to the side here. And then we mark the location of the smaller one as the other side of the case, and that'll go in last. Well, we're getting close to having this done now. That's always exciting. We'll be able to give it a test and make sure that everything has been done properly and that the reel works nicely. Okay, here's your third one going in. Oh, screwdriver. At this point in the open position, spin it. Make sure that it spins nicely. Remember, you put a little bit of grease in there. You may want to back the spool adjuster off a little bit. Notice that your line is turning fine. Okay, next up then would be to seat your spring. Remember, the wide side goes up top. Well, that's not quite it yet. We want to put those series of tension washers in first. And as I said, I put them belly to belly or rim to rim. There's a space in there that's going to make it a little bit flexible. Then we have the flat washer finishes that. 2 flat washers in this case. And we can go ahead and put that adjuster nut on and put that down as far as you can do that by hand. And we have our little cone. The narrow end of the cone goes down. Then you want to seat the star adjuster. So that takes a little bit of a turning motion. Remember, you're trying to get that so that it seats in that ridge. There we go. There's a ridge it's oblong. And let's take that little noisemaker there and put that on. That would be next. Just like that. Then our handle would go on next. Oh, actually, we have a washer that goes on top of that. Right there. That was on the back of the handle when we took it off. I'm going to go drive the trouble aligning it. It's kind of an odd way that they've done that. We can take our nut cap. Make our tie down. Well, we want to tighten this down a little bit. Use that 11mm wrench to do that. Make sure that you tighten down your drag wash or star adjuster. You do not want to trap that by tightening down the nut. And now we need to realign that. There we go. And we have the little cap nut that kind of started all of this. And I'm looking in my parts tray and I noticed that there's one more screw that I haven't put in yet. Do you know where I forgot it? I don't know why, but with cold water reels I seem to forget screws. Well, it's this little one. It's a flat-headed screw and it actually belongs in the back of the case here. So before anybody writes a comment that said, you forgot that little cap, there it is in the back. All right, well, we should be able to have a nice performing reel now. We're going to look at this from a couple of perspectives. The first thing is we want to bring it to free spool and spin it. It spins nicely. The line guide moves easily. Now this has a trip. You can turn the reel to trip it, or you can just simply do it manually. That's on you. Let's reset the line counter, give it a couple of strokes to make sure that it's counting. It's doing nicely. Remember, line counters are going to go out, not in. So let's reset this quickly. Oh, you can see how when the line goes out, the line is coming off the reel. Let's just reset it, it's easier. Okay, when the line is going out, it's going forward, right? So it's telling you got 7 or 8 or 9, whatever your reference points are. And when you're cranking in, it's going to bring it the other way. Very good. That's it. That's your Okuma Cold Water CV or CW 303D fishing reel. That's how it is taken apart, how it's serviced, and how it comes back together again. I hope you've enjoyed that. To all of our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.